Something happens, and I'm sure you're fully aware of this. Something happens when you buy that first investment property. It's almost like if you've bought your first primary residence, you're like, oh, I'm a homeowner now. I get this.
Yeah.
I understand escrow and how all this stuff works. But when you buy that first investment property and you start to see the checks coming in and you start talking to your property manager and you realize that your tenants are paying your mortgage down and that your property is appreciating in value, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I get this now. I get this.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today, I'm here with Rich Fettke. Rich oversees the marketing and business development at Real Wealth. He's passionate about developing a team and systems, and he's always looking for new ways to bring good people to his network. He's a licensed real estate broker, experienced investor, and master certified business coach. Rich, I feel like that bio doesn't nearly do you justice, so I'm gonna stop there. First, I'll say thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really excited to talk to you today, so I appreciate you taking the time out.
Thank you. Good to be here. Looking forward to this.
Awesome. Can we just start with you telling people your story, your background, kind of where you started? And I've heard it. I've heard you on other podcasts and things, but it's actually a very interesting story. I'd love if you would share with our listeners.
Sure. Yeah. And I know before we started, we're both talking about being from the Boston area, but I moved out from Boston in 1995, and met my wife, Kathy, who some of your listeners might know, Kathy Fettke, and she's out there a lot in the real estate world. But I met her in a personal development workshop and just fell in love with her. And then I had owned a health club in the Boston area, and I sold that, and I started coaching when I got to the San Francisco Bay Area, when I moved up to California, and built a really thriving coaching practice. Did really well. It was in early days of coaching back then in 1996 when I really started to get going with it, and really built up this successful practice. Ended up with a book deal with Simon & Schuster, was giving keynote speeches all over the country. So was feeling amazing, like on top of my game, this young guy, and Kathy and I had 2 young daughters, and did that for a while. And then it was 2003 when my book had just come out, and I was diagnosed with melanoma, which is skin cancer. It's the most advanced form of skin cancer, which is usually not the biggest deal because you can have surgery to remove it. But the doctors thought it had spread to my liver because they had me do a CT scan and then an ultrasound, and they showed those same 4 masses on my liver. So I met with this oncologist, and he said, yeah, it looks not good, and looks like it has spread to your liver. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, it means you got about 6 months to live, most likely. So it just rocked our world. Kathy was a stay-at-home mom at the time. Like I said, we had 2 young daughters at that time. They were 7 and 3 years old. And so we did not know what we were going to do because Kathy didn't have a real income source. But we were coaching, and Kathy was coaching as well. So she had this small radio show in the San Francisco Bay Area that she would do on the weekend. It was kind of a pay-to-play radio show, and cover topics around personal development, getting focused, being your best self, all this. And so she pivoted and she said, I want to start interviewing people who are financially successful because I need to know how to make some money here. And she started to have some people on her show, and they were real estate investors. So thankfully, the doctor's diagnosis was wrong. That's why I'm here today, 20 years later. It was what they call a false positive. They thought it had spread to my liver, but they were just clusters of blood vessels that looked like cancer, and then it had spread. And so connecting that to the melanoma, that's why they thought it had spread to my liver. So I was perfectly healthy, diagnosed cancer-free after I had the surgeries to remove the melanoma. But it was that really turned us on to real estate investing. And so after that positive diagnosis that I was going to be okay, and Kathy thinking, that she was not going to have to find a way to make an income, we just looked at that together and said, let's start doing this together. So we took some of the funds that we had from my coaching business and we did a cash out refi on the home. It was our first home that we owned. We did that up in the Bay Area. And we went to a little town north of Dallas, Texas called Rockwall, Texas. And we bought 5 investment properties. So that is what turned us on to real estate investing. And we were investing out of state. And Kathy continued on this path with her radio show to interview successful real estate investors because we were fascinated by it. And her listeners were fascinated by it too. And that's when listeners and some of our friends were saying, how are you doing? How are you living in the San Francisco Bay Area and investing out of state? Again, this was back in 2003 when we didn't have the resources that we have nowadays to be able to do that. So that's when we decided to form a group where we could help people do this and invest out of state. Kathy became a licensed real estate broker. Mortgage broker, sorry. And we just started to help people that way. And we formed this company we called Real Wealth Network at the time we called it. And, we thought we were going to have maybe a couple hundred people that we would help and we'd have this, small kind of side thing. And that group that we thought would be a couple hundred people is now over 71,000 members today that we've helped. Wow. People with acquiring investment properties throughout the United States. So it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And I mean, there's a couple of really, not great that you had a cancer diagnosis, but the point of, sort of what that does for people, I think,
yeah.
A lot of people see real estate as risky. And the funny thing is, like, from having this podcast, talking to other people in the space, it's like, it's almost that when people face something like that they realize how risky normal is and how, kind of like, well, okay, I have this. And I mean, you were an entrepreneur already, but like you had, essentially a job that required you to be a part of it. Whereas with real estate, what we're trying to get to that point of where, like, not that we don't want to work, but we need something that's going to provide income outside of our time. And so Absolutely. It's always fascinating to me. And I'm so happy that, your story had a happy ending there, but like that type of stuff that really catapults people into real estate because I don't know if it's like, what else do I have to lose? What, that kind of thing, but just right. the idea of, it's oftentimes an event, like that it seems to springboard people. But you and Kathy were, kind of doing, I guess, like paving the way for a lot of things. You mentioned you were coaching back in the late 90s, mid to late 90s. Like, yeah, now that's a thing all the time. You hear about coaches all over the place, and
totally.
But I don't remember hearing about that ever before, even a few years ago. Like, now it's very popular and common. So, you sort of were at the front edge of that. Kathy having the radio show. Now everybody has a podcast, which I would equate, she's basically doing the same thing.
Yeah.
That people are doing now with podcasts. It's just fascinating to hear that you were both kind of, I guess, paved the way doing all of this before it was sort of mainstream. So congratulations on being, groundbreakers and stuff. What made you, how did you know to do these things? I guess, now it's like, I feel like there's lots of coaching programs like yours that, they're everywhere. There's social media and all of that. But like not too long ago, I was talking to someone about the iPhone was invented in 2007. So you're doing long distance real estate investing before there were really smartphones, and which is like, I feel like that's the reason we can do it now, but y'all were doing that before. So I'm just kind of curious about what that beginning was like, how you made those things work in such a successful manner, the way that you did, without all of the tech that we have now.
Yeah, I think it's a mindset thing around, for me, it's like being an early adopter has kind of always been part of my makeup, where I'm like, kind of get into weird things. Like when I was 12 years old. That was 1976. I'm almost 60. I was, out in Boston, and I bought a skateboard. I just heard about this thing, skateboarding. And this is, when it was popular in California at the time, but in Boston, it's like no one had a skateboard. Everyone was like, what is this thing? What are you doing?
Yeah.
And so that's what got me to want to live in California, actually, is reading these skateboarding magazines and everything. So I've always had this kind of early adopter mindset of like wanting to try something new and cool. And so even like you mentioned with the radio show with Kathy, or even going back to coaching, it's just, I was into personal development. Listen to personal development audio cassettes and, Brian Tracy, Tony Robbins and all that. So when I saw an ad for this thing called coaching, it said, do you like to help people succeed? Are you into personal development? And so I signed up for this course just to check it out. And that's what turned me on to coaching. And yeah, back then when I told people I was a coach, they'd say, well, what sport? It was definitely unknown back then. Yeah. And so, yeah, now there's coaches for everything, everywhere. Kathy and I work with a relationship coach once a month, just to kind of make sure our relationship is solid and strong after 26 years of marriage. And so there's like a coach for everything now. And even with our radio show, like you mentioned that, I really wanted this thing called an iPod, and Kathy's like, why do you need an iPod when you have a Walkman? And I'm like, you can have 1,000 songs in your pocket. It's amazing, So I got this thing called an iPod way back then. And then all of a sudden I got this email from them and from Apple, and it said, hey, there's this new thing called podcasts. You can listen to it on your iPod, and you can listen to these podcasts. And so I took the CD from Kathy's radio station. It was KKOS up in San Francisco, and I turned it into an MP3. I uploaded it to this new thing on iTunes back then called Podcast. So Kathy had, I think it was the second real estate investing podcast. So it's being an early adopter can really lead to opportunities early because you're ahead of the curve. You get in, and yes, it's riskier because you're trying something new, but at the same time, I think it really can position you to grab an opportunity first. So I think that's an important thing. We're always looking at that with our business today. It's like, what's going on? What's coming? What's next? And how can we adopt or adapt to this new technology or whatever it might be to kind of have the edge?
Yeah, I think, and I guess I want to talk about that a little bit more as far as, kind of what's coming in the future. But before we get to that, I do want to maybe dive in a little bit more about the beginning of your real estate career and what,
Sure.
So you said you went to Texas, north of Dallas there, and bought 5 investment properties. Was this like, we're doing this all at once, we found this spot? Like, how did that kind of come about? You talked about how you got the capital for it, but like, what was your reasoning for choosing that market and being, again, going straight to long distance
Great
investing,
question.
which is, again, like now that's pretty commonplace, but that was
Right.
not necessarily the norm then. So what was your thinking there?
It was not our thinking. It was Kathy, because she had a San Francisco radio show. She was able to get some pretty good guests when it came to real estate investing. And this is, she was learning from these different mentors. She became the mortgage broker. And then she had this guy named Robert Kiyosaki was a guest on her show. We had a friend who was bringing his cash flow game over from Hawaii over to the States. Her name's Laurel. And so she introduced us to Robert Kiyosaki. Kathy had him on the radio show, and he was adamant as Robert can be about, you people in California, you're idiots if you keep hanging on to your high-priced California rental properties. You need to sell. There's a crash coming. You need to sell these properties, and you need to get to areas where it's a linear market, where the jobs are going, where the people are going, places like Dallas, Texas. And so Kathy heard that and came home, and she said, here's where we should go. She went out to Dallas on her own. She flew out there. She met with a property manager, and that property manager introduced her to a real estate agent out there and a broker. And that's the one that showed us these new builds. And we were able to buy those investment properties. And she bought one, and she came back and she said, I bought an investment property. And I was like, what? But it was great. She's the one that, she's a quick start. So she'll jump into things and just go for it. and then she'll buy the puppy, and then she'll say, here, take care of the puppy. And then I'm more the one of the, putting the files together and making sure all the payments are made, and working with the property manager and all that stuff. But it's a great partnership. I think it's important to have someone like that in your life, kind of like two people come together. One's more of the analyst and the structure, and one's more of the go for it, out there, go for it person. And it's worked really well for us. So it was Kiyosaki's advice, that, sell those high priced California properties and diversify, move that, 1031 exchange that into places like Texas. And so that's why we did that. We didn't follow his advice completely. We gave a lot of that advice to the members in our network back then, which was very small, but we were like, Robert Kiyosaki saying to do this. So we connected with a broker, that same broker in the Dallas area. And that was the first person that helped us send people out to him. It was a husband and wife team to buy their investment properties. And so it worked great. And when they paid us a referral fee for sending people to them, they hooked them up with good properties and property management. So that was our introduction into it as far as investors. And then we started to, as the network grew, and what I was saying there about not taking all of his advice, Kathy and I held on to two of our high priced California rental properties. And then we got hit hard in 2008 because we didn't follow his advice. Had we taken those and 1031 exchanged them, we would have some amazing properties, but we ended up having to do short sales on those properties. We lost money, but we steered our members of Real Wealth the right way. And now those people are super stoked on the investment properties they bought.
Yeah. So many good lessons there. I mean, even just from a partnership perspective, right? Whether you're married or not, a lot of times in business, and especially in real estate, like you're going to have partners, and having those complementary strengths is so important. Like someone being the visionary, someone being the integrator, and maybe some of that crosses across, I'm sure. Like I certainly feel like you have plenty of vision as well, but I do think like there's that. Often those are the types of relationships and partnerships, whether in life or in business, that tend to do the best. Just having that kind of ability to bounce. I mean, that's that's me and my wife. Like I'm definitely the dreamer, the visionary, and sometimes it's good to have the person that puts the brakes on a little bit, and let's just hold on a minute and think about this a little more rationally, because it's I think when you are that visionary, you're like, it's gonna work, I'm gonna make it work, this is how we're gonna do this. And then you need that other person, right? Like, I can't believe that. But just having that other person that is help, like the behind the scenes making it work. So I think it's just so important in relationships in general. And I think I mean, I sort of appreciate you sharing that those California properties, you faced some difficulties there, because I do think real estate's not a win every single time. But the fact is, like, despite that, you've been extremely successful. You didn't say, oh, well, we had a couple of properties not go well, we're not doing real estate. It's like, this is something I think that is probably important for people right now, given the market, where there are some struggles in a lot of markets and asset classes and things like that. And I think my biggest fear is that people get turned off from real estate because you don't like do it and then have something go bad and stop doing it. Like, that's when you almost want to double down, because
that's when you really
exactly
lose money,
right now we're going to go, here things are going to go up again eventually. And it's like, you don't want to stop doing it when you just had something go the wrong way. So I just think that those are important lessons.
Those properties that we bought in Rockwall, Texas, they were about 14. What were they? They were, trying to think back on, I know they were renting for $1,500 and they were $150,000 properties. I was thinking 145 to 150,000 we bought those properties for. Today they're worth like 275 to 300. So it's just like, yeah, and renting for double what they were renting then. It's amazing. So if you can hold it for the long haul, that's real estate.
Yeah, it's just the time, just hang on and let it grow. And I would imagine even the properties that you had to short sale, if you had them today, probably worth like dramatically more
we've
than they
looked
were.
them up. Yeah, we'll jump on Zillow or Realtor or something like that and look up and be like, oh man, I wish we could. That's what it comes down to. You just, as long as you can control the asset through a downturn, meaning you have enough reserves or it's at least break even cash flow, and you can ride out the storm, even if the value goes down, it can go down 30-40%. It will come back over time. It's, Kathy and I've been through a couple of downturns now, so we've seen it.
Yeah, you don't realize, I mean, I guess it goes both ways. You don't realize the gains necessarily or the losses unless you have some sort of capital event, whether that's a sale or a refinance. So it's kind of like you a lot of times I think you hear I don't know, I think in social media you see people in some ways get maybe mad. I don't know what it is when they get upset about people that have a high net worth, right? And they're like, we just Elon Musk, like, oh, he could end world hunger because his net worth is whatever it is, but he's not sitting there with like a giant bag of money. It's like it goes with it goes with the value of his companies and things like that. So it's a lot of it's on paper, but as you said, sort of maintaining the cash flow and some level of reserves so that you can ride out those storms, I think is just like incredibly important. And I think right now where we're going to see a lot of, people have success versus people have struggles is if you've, kind of set up your business to run that way.
Yeah. And you said something earlier that was really just wise advice, because there's so many people who are just afraid to invest, and you think like, well, what if there's going to be a market crash? And I heard this YouTube video saying that real estate's going to go down or the economy could crash and all this stuff. And it's like, I heard Kathy say this the other day about, anything can happen if you hold off on investing. It's like, you could make an investment and there could be a pandemic, right? There could be a war. There could be a natural catastrophe. In California, there can be an earthquake. So it's like, if you're always trying to avoid 100% of risk, there's just no way you're going to get any type of gain. So sometimes you just got to take action and just do it smart and make sure that you can, suffer a downturn, or not even suffer, make it through a downturn, and you're going to be okay.
Yeah. And it just goes back to kind of what we talked about at the beginning with your story, is that sure, there's risk, but there's risk in normal, and there's risk in, people get laid off, people lose their jobs, people get sick. Like there are all kinds of things that can happen that can impact the salary that you have. And I'm not suggesting people don't have jobs. Like I'm not one that's like everybody should quit their job. I think you just have to think about it and find other ways that there's some, other source of income. And people talk about having 7 or 8 sources of income, and it's like, maybe have 2, maybe have 3, like start with one additional one and kind of work your way, but don't be afraid to make those investments, because in the long run, it should, pay off for you.
For sure. I mean, that's why we named our company Real Wealth, and we define real wealth as having the money and the freedom to live life on your own terms. So it's not just about making a whole bunch of money and commas and zeros on your net worth statement. It's about being able to have that freedom and the peace of mind, and to eventually build up to a place where you can be job optional, where you have your job. And, most of the people we work with are high income professionals. They're busy professionals. They don't have time to go out and do real estate investing on their own. They want to just acquire hard assets and direct some of that money that they're making from their W-2 job into an investment that's going to grow over time. So yeah, that's what real wealth is to us, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe talk about that a little bit. Like how is your company structured? What, are you, I guess, what's your asset class focus, like things like that. Like, what are you guys working on now, whether that's personally or with your with the people you're coaching?
Yeah, we've kind of stayed in our lane. When we got out of our lane and we tried to, dabble in some things, and like we like a tech startup we raised funds for. We tried to do multifamily, but because we're not good at it and don't understand it, we failed there miserably. So at one point we're just like, let's leave multifamily to the pros, that people know what they're doing and they've been studying it and focused on it. And let's stick in our lane of single family, 1 to 4 unit, residential, and emerging markets around the country. So what we do is we have 18 different property teams currently. We have about 20 employees at Real Wealth. We're a 100% remote company and have been since 2012. And but we started in 2003. So we basically, what we do is we have these property teams around the country that we've vetted. We've gone out to their markets. We know that they're growing markets, that jobs are going there, that people are moving there, that there's a diversified economy with multiple employers, not just one industry. And once we find that, then we find a property team and brokers in that area that have quality investment properties available, and they're ready to go. They're rent ready. They have a tenant in place. And that basically what we do is we educate people on how to do that. We've never charged for that education. We've never charged people for any type of our courses or anything like that. The way we get paid is basically we're a real estate brokerage. So just like any broker, when we refer a client to another broker, there is a referral fee, and that other broker will pay it from the seller's proceeds. So the property team that's selling the property pays us a referral fee for sending them buyers and investors. So it's kind of a win-win for everyone. The buyer finds a great property that's been vetted and in a good market. We benefit because we get the referral fee, and it's great for the seller because they're having a hard time finding investors and people to buy their properties. But we send them a whole bunch of qualified leads of people who've got the money and the credit and who are looking to build a portfolio.
Yeah. I'm understanding this, if I think I'm understanding this correctly, but these are essentially turnkey properties. It's not necessarily like fixer uppers, flips, that kind of thing. These are
right,
turnkey,
exactly, yeah.
Residential. Got it.
Yep. They're either turnkey residential, or we just stopped using the term turnkey because it's been so bastardized. So many people say, oh, it's turnkey. And then you come and you look and you're like, oh, you put new paint and new carpets in there. That's a turnkey rental, huh? It's like, right. So we came up with what we call our real income property standards, that it's probably about a 35-point checklist of everything about how much time is left on the roof, how old is the HVAC system, are there new appliances, all these different things. So for us to be able to offer something, it has to meet these real income property standards, or it needs to be a new build, which is also going to obviously meet those standards, which is what we've been mostly focused on lately, is new builds, brand new build to rent homes, 1 to 4 units. It's the main focus.
Yeah. And I mean, turnkey is a bit misleading because ultimately it's a building, and the parts of a building have wear and tear, and things are going to need to be, sort of taken care of at some point. So it's to think that there's that you're going to, even if you buy brand new, that nothing's ever going to happen, I think is probably misleading. So I like that,
right?
Right. I like that shift in perspective there. You mentioned that you like to be early adopters. What do you see? Everybody's talking about AI, right? Like that's a big part of,
it's huge
everywhere right now. Are you seeing opportunities to use that in real estate within your businesses? I'm sure I do think we're still very early in that, sort of the development of AI and also the use cases of AI. But what are your thoughts on that, and maybe anything else that you think, kind of you're looking at as sort of to be an early adopter of?
Yeah, I mean, it's less than a year, right, since it's become publicly available. It's November last year that ChatGPT came out, and all these, AI platforms became available for us to use. And man, you can see how much it's grown already in less than a year, just the intelligence of it, the ability of it, the way people are using it. So yeah, we started using it day one, a lot for our marketing copy, for also when it comes to real estate, for analyzing these markets, to put in, you can just put in, tell me about this market, this real estate market, and ChatGPT will come back with the population, who the major employers are, population growth numbers. It's fascinating. It's like having the most amazing, intelligent team of assistants who you ask them a couple questions and they go to work on it, but you get the answer back instead of a week, you get it back in a minute or 10 seconds. So we're using it that way for a lot of that research. We're using it for a lot of our marketing copy. It's really helpful. We'll kind of like come up with something and throw it into ChatGPT and say, clean this up, improve the writing. And that's pretty phenomenal. And then a third part, as far as the looking ahead business wise, it's also looking at, there was this whole iBuyer craze of people just buying investment properties through websites. They would go in, they would look at the numbers on it on the website, they'd look at a couple photos, and they would just kind of buy it sight unseen and think they were putting together a solid portfolio. And it's kind of backfired for a lot of them because there wasn't that AI, there wasn't that intelligence. It was basically just a listing, and it was not really scrutinized. So people would end up with some real crappy properties. Sometimes they'd hit a home run and get a good one. But what I see with AI there is, in the future, is people will be able to say, here's what I'm looking for in a property. Here's the pro forma numbers I'm looking for. Here's the returns I want. This is how much I have to put down or how much capital I have to invest. And AI is going to be able to do what a great investment counselor can do nowadays. Someone who's experienced, who understands real estate, who understands all these different markets. That's what we're seeing for AI in the future. So we're looking at how can we incorporate that into our business with our very high touch, high service piece of real wealth. We have 3 investment counselors who are experienced investors. They've been investing for over 10 years. They all have cash flowing portfolios and diversified around the country. So when our members meet with them, there's that human element of, especially if someone's first investment, there's a little bit of fear. And, they don't want to lose. They don't want to make the wrong decision. So meeting with a human at this point is very comforting, where you can ask that person questions. What's your experience here? Have you been to this market? Oh yeah. And what was it like? Well, I felt like this, and so you don't get that from AI. So we're kind of looking now at how are we going to marry artificial intelligence and that human touch for real wealth as far as us as a business.
Yeah. It's at least in my experience with ChatGPT and any of the AI, like it's the prompts. The prompts are incredibly important, right? Like if you ask the question or, suggest whatever you want it to do, and it's a little bit, it's not worded the way you should or something like that, you can get a very, very different answer. And so I think that's where that human element becomes most important, right? Because you have your investment counselors, and if someone's just going to go to ChatGPT and say, hey, tell me where I should buy an investment property, and they don't know anything, like that's when they could really get themselves into a lot of trouble. So
totally.
it's just,
ChatGPT makes mistakes, no doubt.
And it's just using all the tools at your disposal, human and technology. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see the capabilities, but I think almost more compelling is how we are going to use that as a society and like implement it in our businesses and our day-to-day life. And I know there's fear about, well, kids aren't going to have to do homework anymore because they're going to just say ChatGPT, write me a book report on whatever. And I mean, some of that's going to happen, like that is going to happen, but it's, I think it'll be interesting to see how that all, kind of plays out and how it gets incorporated into our regular lives. And
Yeah.
it's, as
Which,
you said,
that's
like,
what we were hearing in the year 2000. It's like,
right,
oh, this internet thing, kids aren't, going to know how to use a dictionary anymore, or, use a, encyclopedia or whatever it might be. And it's
yeah,
like, yeah, you're right. They're going to learn a new way to do it.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Calculators instead of
Yeah,
slide rules. Yeah. So
right, right.
you got to
Yeah,
adapt.
we've moved away from the abacus, and we had, it's just kind of like
Exactly.
that stuff is it. You just have to you figure out how it adapts to the new life, to our new way of doing things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very, very fascinating. Rich, I'm gonna switch gears here. I want to get to ask you the questions I get to ask every guest, and certainly love love this conversation. I don't want to keep you all night, but first question I ask every guest is related to the name of the show, being Know Your Why. And so I'd like to know, what is your why? You've obviously had a ton of success. You've been doing this for a long time, but you haven't stopped. So, kind of what keeps you going? What motivates you at this point?
I mean, the book behind me on my bookshelf is my most recent book. It's called The Wise Investor. And the subtitle, and this is to answer your question, the subtitle is basically, it's called The Wise Investor. It's a modern parable. So it's a story about creating financial freedom and living your best life. And so the reason I have living your best life in there is, as a coach, coaching people for over 20 years, my whole focus was helping people live their best life, be their best selves, grow, learn, be fulfilled, all that good stuff. And then when we got into real estate and we made the purpose of real wealth, that's our purpose, helping people create real wealth, where they have the money and the freedom to live life on their own terms. Because for Kathy and me, we know what it's like to struggle financially. When we went through that whole medical thing and the medical bills and all that, we got hit hard by it, and it was scary. And we know that when you're stressed out about money, you're not a great parent, you're not a great spouse. It makes it harder to be a better human. And so that became our purpose, is helping people have that financial freedom, if you will, and which turns them into better humans, better people, better parents, and all that stuff. So we're driven by that as our purpose. And our whole team at Real Wealth is all aligned around that purpose. We talk about it all the time. It's our core values and everything like that. So it's a long answer to that, but that's what it's about. It's about helping people create real wealth is our purpose, and I've already defined it.
Yeah, I think that's such a the title and maybe even the subtitles, like it's just so to the point. Like this is the reason, right? Like this is the reason that having wealth ultimately matters. Again, it's not like I said, like nobody cares about having a giant bag of money. Like the idea is to get to the point where you can weather the storms without having an impact everything else. The idea is to get where you can help other people achieve those purposes as well. Like that's the whole point. And it's having that defined in your book and within your company, I think is just amazing. I think really, like, it speaks to me as far as that's kind of what I think the whole point behind getting into real estate and like doing this stuff. And that's the idea, is not, it's to not have to worry about, like take the worry of money away, and it allows you to be
stress.
Yeah, that sort of, as you said, like better parent, better spouse, and probably better in a lot of phases in life.
Yeah, it's core.
I feel like I know a few things from hearing you on other podcasts, but I generally ask people to share something about themselves that maybe isn't common knowledge, special skill, a hobby. I have heard a few things. It doesn't have to be anything that nobody else knows, but something that
what you've heard.
I've heard you're an adventure sport kind of aficionado, I think is maybe
or a junkie or an athlete. I've been into adventure sports for a long time. I've done some pretty wild stuff, and bungee jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, bungee jumped off Half Dome, climbed El Capitan a couple times, skydive with Kathy. We both got certified in skydiving. Now we keep it a little more mellow. Now we're surfers, rock climbers. But yeah, that's I don't know. It's just there's a stoke that comes from that. It's the type of thing where I love continuous improvement. And so those are all sports where you can constantly just be in the zone, keep getting a little bit better, keep working on mastery, overcoming fear and all that stuff. Those sports really speak to me. So that's on that side of things.
It fits well with, I think it fits well with being, sort of that early adopter mindset that you spoke about, and just that your willingness to, push the edge, take a little bit of a risk for the sort of overall reward. You bungeed half dome. I've done the part you walk up, right? Like, not, I haven't
up the cables. Yeah.
The cable I've gone up the cables,
that's how we got up there.
Yeah. That was one of the coolest things I've ever done. Also fairly scary. So how do you bungee off of it? I mean, it's
I did it with my younger brother. Kind of, he's my partner in crime, but it's not illegal. You can't base jump off it. They say no air, no flight, but because there's rock climbing and all that. So I think we're I know we're the first, and I think we're the only ones to do it, but we lugged up a whole bunch, 150 feet of bungee cords, which bungee cords pretty much double in length once you jump on them. And there's big boulders up on, they call it the rim or the diving board. Yeah. And we put all this webbing, kind of like belt material around all the big boulders up there, secured everything. Everything was triple backed up, quadruple backed up. And even the bungee cords are backed up. There's multiple. And, it was scary, but it's one of those things where, because the rim hangs over a little bit, so we couldn't do a big dive out. If like a typical of when we jump off a bridge, you can dive and do a big swan dive, but we just like step off, and 5,000 feet below is the valley floor, so it was an amazing rush, and it all went well.
Good. That's glad it well. I mean, I know. Like I said, I know what half dome is like. I've been up there. Like, I can't even imagine how you wouldn't have come back and hit the rocks. I guess that's like that. That's like the jumping off is one thing, but like coming back and smacking up against the side of it is.
If you drop a plumb line down, which we did, there's about 60 feet. We dropped it down about 120 feet. And there's about 60 feet from the end of that line to the rock, because half dome curves over so much, or curves away. And so we knew that as long as we didn't jump out too far, we'd be fine. I swung a little bit. I was so full of adrenaline that I jumped out a little bit and swung I was coming toward the rock and put my foot out, but never made contact with the rock. So that's part of the deal.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I like I said, it was an amazing experience climbing up the cables, but also like, just that part was a little bit scary. So that's incredible.
Yeah, it is a little scary. I mean, just Yosemite is just an amazing place. Yeah, it's breathtaking.
Beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. One of my favorite places. When people hear this and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way?
Probably just our website. I mean, The Wise Investor, my book, is on Amazon. It's actually on sale right now on Amazon. So my publisher's got it on discount. So that's a great way to kind of learn the philosophy and get engaged in the story. But our website is probably the easiest, just realwealth.com.
Perfect. And we'll put all of that in the show notes too. Rich, final question for you. What piece of advice would you give to someone who's thinking about getting started in real estate? They've heard this, they're inspired by your story, and they're kind of trying to figure out what next steps should they take. What would you tell them?
I would say make a commitment to, if you're just getting started, to make a commitment of 3 to 6 months, whatever you think you can commit to, of learning. And just really dive in. There's so many resources, so many amazing books, podcasts, groups like Real Wealth that you can join. Bigger Pockets is amazing. So it's really like educating, and just like listen to your podcast, it's like you can learn so much in 3 to 6 months of daily learning. And it's like, put your mind to it every single day, maybe just devote 20 to 30 minutes each day to learn something. And it's amazing how all these terms and how it seems like a different language and everything, it all starts to come together. And then after that 3 to 6 months, whatever you set, then take action. Buy your first investment property. I think it's great to get started for your first one in a single family, or invest in a syndication into someone's, really understand that if you're going to invest into like multifamily and someone's syndicating it, make sure they're an experienced developer or an operator, that they've been doing it for, they got a track record with some successful projects, and then you could do that. But our advice at Real Wealth is usually just buy that first single family investment property. You can get something for 150, 200,000. So it's not going to crush you. As far as your deposit, leverage it, get a loan, put the 20-25% down, buy that property, or buy a duplex and house hack it, live in one side of that. But something happens, and I'm sure you're fully aware of this, something happens when you buy that first investment property. It's almost like if you've bought your first primary residence, you're like, oh, I'm a homeowner now. I get this. I understand escrow and how all this stuff works. But when you buy that first investment property and you start to see the checks coming in, and you start talking to your property manager, and you realize that your tenants are paying your mortgage down, and that your property is appreciating in value, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I get this now. I get this. And then you just repeat it. And then you get another one. And most people I know usually start with single family. They get, 2, 3, sometimes 5 or 10 investment properties. And then they'll kind of often graduate, and they'll get into more multifamily, or they'll diversify and they'll invest in other people's funds. But I think that's the key. Educate yourself and get started, take action. The reason I say that is I've got friends who've been talking about investing, buying their first investment property for 15 years. Yeah. And because they know that Kathy and I invest, and they're like, oh, I got to do this. And they're kicking themselves now. They missed this last window of opportunity of all the awesome appreciation and the low interest rates. But the best time to get started is now, really. Right. Just like, don't wait.
Yeah, it's I think that's great advice. And I think that's, again, it's like that just because we sort of finished one bull run doesn't mean there's never going to be another one. Like it's not too late. It's too late to go back in time, but it's not too late to invest in real estate and have the same thing happen to you over the next 10 years. Like it's still going to do the same thing. So it has been doing it since the beginning of time, really. So it's kind of reliable over time.
Absolutely. And also, if you've got a decent W-2 income, the tax benefits are amazing too. So you're actually going to be, in a way, making money that way too.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the benefits are innumerable. I think it's
yes.
And that's, you feel that way once you've done it, right? Like you said, so you buy a home, you're a homeowner, you're like, look, I did it. I bought a home. You buy an investment property. Now you're an investor. You're really doing it. And you just start to see all of those things happening that you hear people talking about. And if you're doing that, 3-6 months of education, all that stuff you learned, all of a sudden you start to put it in action, and you see, wait, this is really true, and then some. So it is a really cool transition, and
it's a hard asset. It's not going to vaporize, it's like, Kathy and I invest in stocks too, but 80% of our investments are in real estate, because we've seen that stocks can just vaporize, it can go to nothing. But when you have a hard asset, and last time I checked, people like to live indoors, so residential real estate is definitely a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Rich, this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate your story. Like I said, there's so much. I know there's so much more to it, but thank you so much for taking the time out today and sharing everything that you did with me and my listeners. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Folks listening, I know you're going to love this episode. Rich provided a ton of value. Please like, rate, and review the show so we can get more great guests. And thank you all for listening.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?